Family abandoned me because sis blames me for her divorce. Years later, I get an email out of nowhere explaining me everything with proof. So I ruined her life with it. Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me out of their lives and kicked me out of the house. I, 29M, was 22 at the time and wasn't financially stable enough to rent an apartment on my own, and what had happened was so sudden that I'd had no time to prepare myself for it at all, mentally or financially. The reason behind all of this was my sister. My sister, Hannah, 37F, and I have never been close because of the significant age gap between us. She got married to her boyfriend, Pete, 39M, of 3 years when she was 27, and they were married for 3 years. They got divorced 3 years into their marriage because Hannah had accused Pete of having an affair with one of my friends. I'd been living with my parents after college since I'd just started working, and I wanted to save some money before I moved out. My parents were okay with that arrangement as well, but that was only until my sister announced her divorce. She just came back home one day, crying hysterically, and announced that she'd filed for divorce because her husband had been cheating on her for 6 months now. And then, she went on to throw me under the bus for introducing my friend to him. My friend, Emily, 28F, was trying to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified dietitian, he agreed to help her out. I had been the one to introduce her to him, and apparently, she was the one Pete had been cheating on my sister with. I was shocked that this was happening because even though Emily and I weren't close, I knew for a fact that she was a good woman and would never get with a married man. Besides, cheating was so out of character for Pete as well. He was totally smitten with Hannah and only ever had good things to say about her, so I found it incredibly hard to believe that he'd cheated on her. I had my doubts, but my parents believed her instantly and didn't even question anything, in spite of the fact that she never had any proof of him cheating. They just took her word for it, but I'm not gonna hold that against them, since they would choose their own daughter over their son-in-law, regardless of who was right. What I didn't understand was why they readily kicked me out just because Hannah said so. She just stormed in one day, threw a tantrum, and somehow convinced my parents to throw me out simply because I'd been the one to introduce Emily to Pete. She accused me of ruining her marriage, and my parents agreed with her, for some reason. I was devastated and tried to stop my parents, but they weren't ready to listen to me at all and told me that if I didn't leave then they'd forcefully kick me out. In just one day, I'd lost my family and my home and had absolutely no idea where to go. I was literally sobbing out on the sidewalk with all my stuff for an hour or so before I was able to pull myself together and went to a friend's house for the night. I tried contacting them every single day for the next few days but didn't have any luck. My friend was kind enough to let me live at his place until I was able to find an apartment for myself. Unfortunately, my parents had pretty much made up their minds that I was in the wrong here and I was the one responsible for the divorce. My mom and dad had actually told me that they were disgusted by what I'd done before kicking me out, which didn't even make sense because it wasn't as if I'd been the one who Pete cheated with. They'd blocked my number so I couldn't get through to them at all, and when I tried to visit them, my mom threatened to call the cops on me if I didn't leave. So after that, I finally realized that they were serious about this and actually did blame me for whatever had happened. I don't think I had any reason to be surprised since my sister always had been the favorite child. My parents had never really planned for a second child, so I ended up always getting sidelined, and while I didn't care much for it growing up, I didn't know that it would lead to something so huge. Thinking about it now, I guess I should have seen it coming, but honestly, I don't think anyone in my place could have seen something like this coming. Anyway, I even tried to figure out things for myself to make sense of it all for the next couple of weeks, since Hannah and my parents had practically cut me off altogether and I had no way to get to them. I couldn't speak to Pete either because he blocked me too, which didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't find him either because both Hannah and Pete had vacated the house they used to live in and had left to live with their respective parents instead. So I had no way to get through to anyone involved, which is why I approached my last resort to get to the truth, Emily. Like I said, Emily and I weren't really close, but I had to do what I had to do, so I just asked to meet her one day and explain the situation to her. I asked her if what Hannah had said about the affair was true, and she denied it vehemently. And I believed her, to be honest. Emily told me that she'd only ever met Pete a few times and only in a professional capacity, so there was absolutely nothing going on between them, and she had no idea why Hannah would say something so awful about her. She even told me that she'd had a steady boyfriend for a couple of years already and was planning to get hitched in a few months, too. She even showed me pictures, and what she'd told me was way more convincing than whatever Hannah had said. I had no proof, but I just knew somehow that Hannah had been lying about the real reason for the divorce. But since I had no proof, I couldn't go back to my family, and I most certainly couldn't go back without it. Back then, I was pretty desperate to go back to living with my family since I really missed them, despite what they'd done to me. With time, however, I was able to get over it and move on with my life. I managed to find a place and made my job the purpose of my life so that I'd have something to distract myself with. And I also had to pay the bills, so it was a better way of coping than just sitting around and being depressed, since I didn't have any other option either. I was hurting a lot, but I knew I had to go on somehow, with or without my family's support. Years passed and now, I'm doing much better in life. I've moved from my tiny apartment to a much bigger one and even got engaged to my girlfriend of 2 years around a week ago. And our engagement post is what ended up being a game changer for me, because just a few days after that post, I received an email out of literally nowhere that not only explained the entire story of Hannah's divorce to me and gave me all the answers I needed, but also had proof attached. My fiancée, Liza, 30F, usually only posted us on Instagram, but the picture from our engagement made it to her Facebook feed as well, where she had a wider audience. It was a public post as well, and a lot of people saw it, including my ex-brother-in-law, Pete. He happened to be someone my fiancée had met at a seminar a few years back, since she was a doctor, and had ended up adding him on Facebook, which is how he found me. It really is a small world, and for the first time, I was glad about it. He reached out to me a few days after we posted, but instead of texting me on social media, he decided to send me an anonymous email. He explained later on that he did this just so that he wouldn't feel weird about what he was doing, since it had been several years since his divorce and he didn't want to seem like a sore loser who still hadn't managed to move on from what happened. Besides, he'd been the one to block me in the first place, so he felt weird and conscious about getting back in touch with me about something that happened so many years back. Coming to the contents of the email I received, it had the full story and proof of what had happened 7 years ago, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I went through it. So apparently, my sister had been the one cheating on Pete and not the other way around like she'd been telling us for so long. Not only was that a huge lie, but even more interesting was the fact that she'd been cheating on Pete with a friend of mine, just like she'd accused him. My friend Frank, 28M, was a cashier at the grocery store near Hannah's house back then, and I never would have made the connection myself, since I'd literally never seen them together. I guess they'd kept it well under wraps, but not enough for Pete to not find out. And when Hannah was confronted, she told Pete that it was all my fault because I'd been the one to introduce her to Frank, and had even told her about how he needed her help since he was an aspiring singer and she was a pretty good singer herself. She'd agreed to help him, and bam, they'd fallen in love before they knew it. She even said that I was in on IT and had helped them keep things under wraps for so long. Obviously, all of this was a complete lie, and I hadn't even known that Frank and Hannah had something going on. He was outraged when he found out and ended up blocking my entire family, which he admits now was kind of stupid on his part, but he was so angry that he hadn't given his actions much thought. Of course, he told me all of that in person, since the email itself was meant to be as impersonal as possible, as he didn't want it to be traced back to him, but I did figure it out. The proof that he'd attached were a bunch of screenshots of emails between my sister and Frank where they were discussing how easy it is to fool Pete, and were full of confessions of love and plans for where they were going to meet next. There was no way she could deny any of this, because she'd even signed off in the emails with her middle name, which not many people are aware of. I had her dead to rights. I figured out that it must have been Pete who'd sent me this email after I combed through Liza's Facebook friends, because my gut feeling told me that this definitely had something to do with social media, and when I was finally able to find Pete in her list, I got in touch with him. We decided to meet a few days ago, and he told me that he'd found out about what Hannah had told her family from Emily, who'd met him a couple of years back. I told her to keep my side of the story a secret, and I was kicking myself for it when I realized that if I hadn't said that, she probably would have told Pete about it, and I would have been able to prove my innocence ages ago. Anyway, they'd run into each other a couple of years ago, and she'd ended up asking him about the divorce, so they got to talking, and finally, he'd also learned what Hannah had told us. He confessed that he'd wanted to talk to me about it and tell me the truth, but didn't because he felt weird. I swear, if Pete wasn't so easily embarrassed, my life would have been a lot easier to deal with. I did forgive him though, since I needed his help to absolutely destroy my sister, and I knew he'd be on board with it as well. Hannah had definitely been lying to my parents so she'd have financial support during her divorce, and had even thrown me under the bus for good measure because she'd known that one conversation with Emily and I'd know the truth. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that someone, especially someone who was related to me by blood, could be this selfish. I'm sure she'd never bothered to set the record straight either, and my parents had just lapped up whatever lies she'd been feeding them during her divorce. She'd known that if the truth about her being the cheater had been revealed to our parents, she would have been in big trouble, and she just couldn't risk that. Well, too bad, but it was finally out now, and I was going to use it to ruin her life just like she'd ruined mine all those years ago. I didn't know if my family lived in the same house since I hadn't visited them for 7 years, but as luck would have it, they hadn't moved. I confirmed with an old neighbor of mine before showing up, and was glad to learn that Hannah was still living with them as well. That wasn't very surprising to me, because Hannah always had been a couch potato and hated doing any work herself, so if she had the option of living with her aging parents and making them do all the chores for her, she'd definitely do it. Anyway, 2 days back, Pete and I just showed up without warning at their house. My mom opened the door, and we barely even gave her any time to register what was happening before we walked in. My dad and Hannah were also present in the living room, and we were one happy family again, but not for long, since their expressions soured just as soon as we entered. My dad began to threaten us immediately and said that he'd call the cops if we didn't get the hell out of his house, and I shot right back, saying that he was free to do whatever he wanted to, but only after he'd read the documents that we were about to show them. My parents looked incredibly confused, but Hannah looked like she was gonna barf and excused herself so that she could go to her room. I thought she was trying to escape, but there was no point in doing so anyway. Pete went on to show the divorce documents and the screenshots of Hannah and Frank's emails while I explained the real story. Pete also told my parents how Hannah had to give up our family heirloom, my grandmother's diamond ring, in the settlement because she couldn't afford to pay him the money since she's a high school teacher, so she had to sell the ring instead. My parents were already horrified by what we'd told them, and that was just the cherry on top. We watched the drama unfold as my dad demanded an explanation from Hannah for all that had happened, and when she still tried to lie and cover up the truth despite all the evidence against her, my dad promptly kicked her out. He packed her stuff for her and handed over the bags to her, then told us all to get the hell out of their house. I didn't need to be told twice and left with Pete while my sister begged and pleaded with my parents to let her back in just like I had, all those years ago. This was karma at its best, and I couldn't be happier about it. It's been a couple of days since then, and my sister showed up at my place a few hours ago, demanding that I make things right with my parents immediately. I didn't even know how she found me, but I told her that I didn't owe her anything anymore. She'd ruined my life once, so I repaid her the favor and we were now fair and square. I guess she really had no pride left, because as soon as I said that, she started sobbing and accusing me of being a monster. I didn't care much for her drama, though, and shut the door while she continued to sob relentlessly. I just put my headphones on and listened to music while Liza, my fiancée, worked in her study so neither of us would be disturbed. After a while, Hannah finally left us alone, but she'd left a message with a marker on my door to remind me that I was nothing but a revengeful monster. I don't see anything wrong with what I did, very frankly, and don't feel sorry in the least, but Hannah seems pretty convinced that I'm the villain here, somehow. I just did to her what she'd done to me several years ago, except that I told the truth while she did nothing except lie and throw me under the bus. So what do you guys think? Ida for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out 7 years after she accused me of causing her divorce? Update 1. So, Hannah has still been bothering me even though a whole week has passed since she got kicked out. I had to threaten her with the fear of cops when she called me for the 14th time today, and only then did she stop. I don't even know how she managed to find my phone number and address, but I'm least interested in that right now. Hannah's trying to make me feel sympathetic towards her because I guess a school teacher's salary isn't enough for her to live on, but I don't think that's true, and she's just upset that she has to look for a place and pay for her own rent, electricity, and groceries now that our parents have kicked her out, so I don't feel too sorry for her. And in case you guys were wondering, yes, I did block her number several times, but I guess she's making her friends add me to conference calls, so there's no point. As for my parents, they're just as bad, if not worse than Hannah. They found me on Facebook and saw the post about my engagement as well. So now, they want to be part of my life once more and even express their desire to attend my wedding. They haven't apologized yet, but for some reason, they expect me to just invite them to my wedding, which is supposed to be a really important day for me. I don't understand where these people find the guts to say crap like this, but at least I'm not responding to any of it. Liza and I have had a field day reading their texts because there's really just no way there for real right now. It's all just really sad for them. Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house yet again after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was about to leave for work, but she stopped me by throwing herself across the hood of my car and refused to budge until I spoke to her. It was pretty exasperating, and I ended up actually calling the police this time. They took her away while she screamed and cried and tried her best to show me as the bad guy here, but unfortunately, nobody was buying her sad girl act here. It took some time to press charges against her, but as soon as I got it done, I left for work because I didn't want to let this little incident ruin my day. I was sure my parents would bail her out anyway since she was their favorite, and I turned out to be right as well. My parents, after bailing her out, sent me a lengthy text about how I was being way too harsh on them for an honest mistake that they'd made almost a decade ago. It was hilarious because nothing about what my sister and parents had put me through was either honest or even a mistake. They knew what they were doing and were definitely aware of how cruel they were, but that didn't stop them from throwing me out onto the street in spite of knowing that I had no other place to go. So now that I can do the same to them, I don't see a reason to be forgiving and kind. I texted my parents back saying that they'd lost any right to tell me what I could and couldn't do 7 years ago, so they'd better stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet since I haven't had the time to check my messages, but I will, soon. Hopefully, then I'll be rid of this entire family for good. Update 3. I just got back home from work and checked my socials, only to see that my parents had yet again sent me another long message. Liza and I went through it together, and I swear, this was the funniest thing I've ever read. I guess the poor folks don't even know that I'm not even hurt by anything they say or do now. I'm just laughing at how delusional and pathetic they are. Apparently, they still believe that we're family and told me that they've taken Hannah back in with them and have decided that both their kids deserve a second chance. As if I'd ever been in the wrong at all. So while they'd taken my sister back in, they also expected me and Liza to come to their house sometime soon for dinner, and so we could sort out our differences in a civilized manner before the wedding. Bold of them to assume that I'd even want them at my wedding in the first place. We had a good laugh about their stupid message, and after that, I wrote right back saying that I wasn't interested in the slightest in anything that they'd invited us to and was just fine living away from them like I had for these past 7 years. They'd shown me that I was better off without them, and I was forever going to be thankful for that. I didn't need them at all anymore, and neither did I want their so-called forgiveness, so they could peacefully continue to play happy family with my sister like they had been so far. With that last text, I blocked them once and for all because I didn't even want the laughs anymore. I was done and I was out. I'm sure they'll try to get back in touch with me one way or another soon, but too bad for them. I'm not having it anymore. Liza is the only family I need now, and I'm happy with just her. My parents and my sister have unfortunately never been able to look beyond themselves, and I highly doubt that they ever will, so the next time they get in touch with me, they'll be speaking to my lawyer as well, and that's a promise.
I'm a 27-year-old male with a twin sister. Growing up, my twin sister and I experienced very different treatment from our parents. My parents genuinely seemed convinced for some reason that my sister was destined for greatness, while I was the so-called black sheep. Just because I was more interested in playing sports than studying. They constantly compared us, which was demoralizing and bruised. Growing up, I felt pretty low about myself for a long time. When I was a kid, my sister always had these huge, fancy parties on our birthdays, and I felt like I was just there, not really noticed. She'd have sleepovers with her pals, giggling and having fun, and I was sometimes pulled into playing tea party games I didn't really want to. But you know what? Secretly, I kind of enjoyed those tea parties too. It felt like my grandma was the only one who really cared about me and my family. Whenever she visited, she made sure to bring my favorite chocolates, and sometimes even gave me some money to spoil myself. But things started changing. The attention my twin sister got turned into a sort of emotional bullying towards me. My parents started making fun of my grades and putting down my dreams. It felt as though no matter how much I tried, I could never meet their expectations. Although I was good at sports, they barred me from participating in extracurricular activities as they wanted me to concentrate only on studies, just like my sister. It was frustrating, and I felt helpless as a child. I remember this one incident where I had a particularly heated argument with my parents about my future. When I started applying for college because they didn't want to pay for me while they had set aside money for our college funds, they wanted to use most of the funds on my sister's education. They believed her decision to attend an expensive school would help her excel better. They wanted me to attend a community college instead of a decent college of my choice. My grades were actually pretty good, but my parents didn't seem to want to invest much in me. When my grandmother learned about this, it led to a big fight between her and my parents. She even warned my mom that she'd be cut out of her will if they didn't agree to send me to a good college, just like they did for my sister. After a few days of arguing, they finally gave in. I will always be thankful to my grandmother because of this. It was when I went away to college that I first experienced what freedom felt like for the first time. No one was watching over my shoulders. No one was comparing my grades, and no one was trying to compete with me. I met people and formed friendships with like-minded individuals. Despite the emotional and physical scars I had sustained over the years due to my family, I concentrated on putting it all behind me and enjoying this college experience as much as I could. During this time, I discovered my knack for logo and graphic design. I decided to start learning Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator by watching YouTube videos so I could make some side money. I then reached out to local businesses in my area to see if they needed a logo designer and slowly started building a portfolio of my work. Throughout college, I maintained this side hustle and never asked for a penny from my parents. When I graduated from college, instead of getting a corporate job, I realized I could turn my side hustle into a legitimate business, as I already had clients who were ready to keep me on retainers. After years of being loyal to them, I made the decision to move into an apartment with roommates, and life was looking up. Meanwhile, my sister was excelling and getting ready for higher studies in biology, at least according to what my parents told me. Our contact dwindled over the years, especially after we went to different colleges. Over the years, my parents never really made any effort to contact me, hence I stopped trying as well. After a while, I was financially independent, now and had been going to therapy for years. So I have started to heal from my childhood wounds slowly. As a graphic designer, I know the custom of reviews are super important. Usually, I ask my clients if they like my work to write a review on Google or Facebook so that it helps more people find out about my business. Recently, one of my high-end clients was really happy with my work, so he posted a long message on Facebook, appreciating my professionalism and work ethic. I was really surprised by this sweet gesture, and I started getting messages from strangers who are interested in my work. His post was seen by my entire family and close friends as he had tagged me, so some of them began leaving comments under the posts, congratulating me for doing well. I thought things were finally looking up for me, but that's when everything took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, my parents called me out of nowhere last week, requesting a meeting with me. All these years, they had never shown any interest in my life or even visited me in college, so I was pretty taken aback. I pondered over it for days and even talked with my therapist regarding this. I imagine maybe they had realized the abuse I'd gone through as a child and wanted to offer an apology after all these years. I decided to meet them over lunch in a public place just in case things didn't go well, and I needed a quick exit. On the day I met them, My father immediately walked in to hug me. But my mother, as usual, maintained her distance and gave a quick smile. We sat down, gave our orders, and exchanged some small talk. I was already feeling anxious and wanted them to just get to the point, so I asked why they reached out to me, suddenly, after all these years. It was then that my mother dropped a bombshell. My sister, the golden child of the family, was 2 months pregnant, and they had just found out. The news caught me off guard, and I almost choked on my cocktail. Turns out my sister had a one-night fling with a guy at a party, and now she was expecting a baby. She had only just found out. And because she had never asked for his name, she could not locate the father. As a result, she planned to move back in with our parents who would support her in taking care of the baby, while she attempted to continue her studies from home. The reason my parents contacted me, as they put it, was because they wanted my help financially. They claimed I would soon be an uncle, and they expected me to pitch in to caring for my sister's upcoming child. My face burned with anger as their words sank in. After a lifetime of feeling like an afterthought, they only reached out to me for my assistance because of my pregnant sister. I immediately signaled the server requesting the bill, paid it, and abruptly left the restaurant. My mother chased after me, urging me to be a good son and insisting the baby needed a good role model. I reached home and turned off my phone as I kept getting a lot of calls and messages from my parents. After a night's sleep, when I finally switched my phone back on the next day, I found not only missed calls and messages from my mother, but also a lengthy text from my sister. In her message, she made demands, insisting that I take care of her child and be a responsible uncle. She told me how I was doing well in my life and earning good money now, so I shouldn't be selfish, and could afford to send her a couple of $100s every month to help her take care of the baby. I didn't even bother to reply to her. I cut her call. I just couldn't sleep that night and stayed up in bed for hours, wide awake as this whole situation kept bothering me. The condescending tone of my parents, their abuses over the years, and my sister's entitlement were all just too much, and I felt like I couldn't take it anymore. This is when I decided to make a Facebook post from my personal ID regarding my situation. I thought only my family and close friends on Facebook would read this, and I just wanted the truth to be out. I wrote down everything right down to how unworthy my parents had made me feel over the years and had only reached out when they needed financial assistance. After I posted it, I shut down my laptop and went to sleep. When I woke up the following day, I discovered that the post had gone viral in a matter of hours. There were people from my friend list, relatives, and even complete strangers who had commented their support under my posts, and some had even shared it. It seemed like a lot of people understood the abuse, and the message behind the post resonated with them. There were hundreds of comments from people sharing their own similar stories about family abuses, which was heartbreaking to read. My parents must have received angry calls from some of my relatives because my mother called me quite upset and asked me to delete the post immediately. She explained how she had always thought I wouldn't amount to anything and had doubted my career success, which is why she hadn't reached out to me earlier. However, after seeing the positive review from my client, she realized my business was thriving, and that's when she got in touch to ask for help regarding my sister. She kept insisting on how important it is for us to protect the family's reputation. My dad reacted a bit differently. He sent an apology via text but also wanted me to remove the post so that we could handle the situation privately and prevent any further damage to the family's reputation. My parents seemed to have been caught off guard by this sudden public revelation of our dysfunctional family dynamics. Throughout my life, my family consistently favored my sister and convinced me that I could never achieve success in my career. However, after I wrote the post on Facebook calling them out, they suddenly wanted to play family with me despite my parents' multiple pleas to delete the posts. I chose to leave the post as it was to prove them all wrong, so now I can have the last laugh. This decision has now caused a rift within the family. While my grandmother and some other family members have reached out to me and openly provided their support, a few others, especially from my dad's side, are urging me to keep the family matters within the family. So I stay for calling out my parents on Facebook, refusing to take the post down, and finally getting the last laugh after all these years. Update 1. It's been a whirlwind of a week since I last shared my story, and the support and encouragement I have received from everyone has been overwhelming. It's heartening to know that I'm not alone during this time. We come from a close-knit neighborhood, so now everybody knows our business. After I posted on Facebook, and it seems that my post has ignited conversations within our social circle. My parents have received criticism, not only from relatives, but also from their close friends and neighbors, who were previously unaware of the extent of favoritism and emotional abuse. I found out from my relatives the reason why my family reached out to me out of the blue. You see, my parents are currently enjoying their retirement, and over the years they have used up most of their savings to clear their debts and explore the world. My sister has never had a job as my parents wanted her to concentrate only on studies, which meant she didn't have any savings. Now, with the arrival of the baby, they realized they needed financial support when they came across the Facebook review that my client had written and tagged me. They realized that my business was actually doing good, and I was earning more than they had imagined, and they were shocked that I had proved them all wrong and established myself. But instead of wishing me well, they saw this as an opportunity to ask for financial help. However, when I declined and decided to publicly address the issue on Facebook, they had no alternative but to back down. My sister had called me a few days ago after I wrote the post, and as I had expected, she sounded beyond enraged. Apparently, our parents are now refusing to take care of her and the baby financially, as they have realized not to coddle her any longer and want her to be responsible for her own actions. They are okay with my sister moving in as long as she drops her plans for higher studies for now and starts looking for a job with her biology degree. They also want her to contact the father through prenatal paternity testing so she can inform him about the pregnancy. After hearing what my parents had to say, my sister, who had never been asked previously to take any kind of responsibility, her entire life was stumped. She thought she could call and direct her anger out on me, but this time I didn't keep quiet and decided to stand up for myself. I told her that she wasn't entitled to my hard-earned money just because she got pregnant from a one-night stand. I let her know that her lack of maturity wasn't really my problem. While I might have come across as harsh, I believe it marked a turning point in our conversation, making my sister realize she could no longer bully me. I ended the call by feeling a sense of satisfaction for speaking my mind. I then went ahead and sent a group text to my parents and sister, letting them know that I expected a formal apology for the abuse I had suffered. I wanted them to acknowledge the pain of mistreatment I had endured through all those years. The text was clear, stating that this apology was not a mere request. It was a requirement, a necessary step towards reconciliation. I emphasized that I had reached a point where I couldn't continue down the same path. The emotional toll of their actions was too heavy to bear any longer. If they refused to take this step, if they remained unwilling to admit their wrongdoings, it might be the end of the road for our relationship. Now I'm going to wait and see how they react. The ball is in their court, and I hope that they make the right decision. Update 2. Although it's been a month now, I still continue to receive overwhelming support and responses from strangers every day. I feel much lighter since I spoke my truth and no longer have to worry about hiding my past from the world. First, I want to let everyone know that I am perfectly safe and not at all depressed, as many seem to have assumed in the comments. What happened with my parents did affect me initially, but I have since learned to not hold it against them for my own mental well-being. As my therapist explained, I can't really control other people's actions. The only thing that I can control is my own emotions. Since my ultimatum, my parents have tried reaching out to me, alternating between apologies and attempts to downplay the situation. They are still struggling to come to terms with the public exposure of our family problems, and it's clear that their own reputation is of more concern to them than understanding my feelings. After some contemplation, I made the decision to remove the Facebook post from my page, even though I had planned to keep it up forever. I realized that the post had accomplished precisely what I had hoped for, a public declaration calling out my parents for their years of abuse. My mother continues to believe that I could have done better and pointed these things out years earlier to them instead of letting it build up for so long and humiliating them publicly. This really frustrates me because as a teenager, I had always tried to talk to them about the situation, but they never listened to me. I have told her that if she feels that it was my fault for how she treated me, then I would like to take some space from her, as I didn't want this to affect my mental well-being anymore. As for my sister, she took a while, but eventually she surprised me with an apology. I don't know if it's the pregnancy hormones or a newfound realization that prompted her to reach out. In the lengthy text, she expressed that she could finally grasp the hardships I had to endure for being treated differently all those years, with all parents no longer providing financial support, and reminding her every day to take responsibility for her choices. She was experiencing the pressures I had felt growing up. She went on to explain that when she initially found out she was pregnant, it had stirred fear in her heart. The reality of having to handle this on her own hit her hard, and she realized she had made mistakes. Financial constraints loomed, and she acknowledged that she had wrongly directed her anger at me. She had learned from our parents that I was doing well in my career, and this made her think that she could ask me to contribute. But when I refused, it finally dawned on her that she would have to take responsibility for her own life. She told me that she was trying her best to find a job as she wanted to be a better example to her child. She apologized for asking me for money and assured me that she wouldn't be doing that ever again. She said that she wanted me to be a part of her baby's life as a positive male role model. Although I was a bit hesitant, I accepted the apology and we met over lunch. I was also happy to hear that she was looking for a job, and I promised to help her out with her resume and cover letter. Since we started talking, my sister has been suggesting that we should talk to our parents about what I went through so they can understand my perspective better. But I don't think I'm ready yet to have a conversation with them. I finally pay the long overdue visit to my grandmother this weekend. She's been my rock, my pillar of support, always standing by my side through all these years. It was high time I expressed my heartfelt thanks for everything she has done for me. When I visited her, the nostalgia of my childhood rushed back. The familiar scent of her home-cooked meals, the creaky wooden floors, and the warm smile on her face were everything that I loved about her. We spent the entire afternoon talking about our lives, dreams, family. She told me that she was proud of me for standing up to my parents after all these years. She let me know that she had always pointed out my parents' unfair treatment towards me, but they had never acknowledged it. I told her that regardless of what my parents had put me through, I didn't blame her, and I wanted her to know that her kindness towards me had profoundly shaped my life. Now, coming to my graphic design business, which a lot of you have been curious about, it is doing exceptionally well, just as I had expected. Ever since my high-end client left a positive view of my work, my inbox has been flooded with inquiries. The satisfaction of knowing that clients appreciate my work is immeasurable. It's not just about the growth of my business, but the validation that I'm on the right path. Each new inquiry feels like a step closer to my goals, and it ignites a sense of passion and motivation to keep pushing forward. It's truly thrilling to see that all the efforts and hard work I've poured into this are finally paying off. Overall, I would say that this whole experience has been tough, but also incredibly liberating. For now, I plan on focusing on my work, personal growth, and spending my time with supportive friends and family members only. Although the path to healing is a long one, and I don't know where it will lead. I am thankful for the outpouring of support and understanding I have received here from Reddit community. While I have taken small steps towards mending relationships with my family, I am committed to prioritizing my own well-being first and ensuring that I'm not subject to emotional abuse or favoritism any longer. I will continue to share updates if there is anything interesting. Update. 3 things have really turned out well, and a lot has changed in my life in the past 6 months. One of the most beautiful and life-changing experiences has been meeting my niece. My sister, who was pregnant, had given birth to the most adorable baby girl. She asked me to be her godfather, and I couldn't feel more honored by this special role. It's a new chapter in our family's story, and I'm looking forward to watching this little one grow up. In the past few months, my parents have put in sincere efforts to mend our relationship. It turns out that my grandmother and other relatives had a heart-to-heart talk with them, and it seems to have made a difference. My mother, in particular, has been trying hard to connect with me on a deeper level. She admitted to feeling both embarrassed and regretful that she couldn't be a better parent to me. Her genuine apology moved me to tears, because these were the words I had longed to hear for so many years. I couldn't help but think about how different things might have been if she had spoken to me with these words during my upbringing, potentially sparing me years of suffering and pain. My dad, on the other hand, has suggested teaching me golf, emphasizing how learning the sport could potentially help me attract more high-end clients. Golf has turned out to be more challenging than I initially anticipated, and it certainly requires some dedicated practice to master. Nevertheless, I enjoy practicing with my dad every weekend and steadily improving with each session. My relationship with my sister has also evolved significantly over time. We now regularly meet for Saturday morning breakfast where we catch up to each other's lives. We also found out the father of her child and reaching out to him. Both of them agreed on a court-signed document to co-parent the child together. I have met the guy and he seems like a genuine fellow. Since becoming a mother, my sister has been working hard to change herself. She seems to have realized the importance of understanding and empathy, something that was long overdue. Moreover, she has secured a work-from-home opportunity that suits her well. She is diligently saving money to move out of our parents' house, and it's heartening to see her make positive strides in her life to help repair the long-standing resentments in our family and unspoken feelings. We have all planned to go for family therapy soon. It hasn't been an easy process, and at times our conversations seem to get emotionally charged. Hence, going for therapy will allow us to have more honest conversations professionally. I've seen considerable growth in my graphic design business thanks to the skills I have developed over the years. I absolutely love my job, and I am grateful for my career. I'm glad I found my true calling early in life, and there's nothing I find more satisfying than working on my designs and assisting my clients. I have managed to expand my client base to an international level after multiple positive reviews from my existing customer base. If everything goes well, I plan on hosting free workshops to help college students and aspiring graphic designers with my industry knowledge. I remember the struggles I faced when I was new to this field and no one to guide me, so I'm hoping my workshops can make a difference for these folks. I'm excited about the future and the opportunities it holds for both my career and my life. Life is good for me now, and I couldn't be more grateful for the love and support I received from everyone these past couple of months. I hope this can be my last update regarding this situation.
I was discriminated against my entire life because of my golden child sister. She now tried walking down the aisle at my wedding, and I finally got revenge. So, ever since I could remember, my parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in subtle ways either. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe it and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe. Even if there was undeniable proof, they'd still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me in tandem. My birthday cake had to be a flavor she wanted. Hers did not, and my parents always denied knowing I didn't like that type of cake. They always bought her a bit more than for me. We went to where she wanted, even if it was an event that should be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me, just used me as a punching bag. But at first she mostly ignored me. But then it got really bad when we were young teens. I'm not sure what the cause and effect are, but she found herself with no friends and her behavior got worse. Did her friends move? Did they ditch her because she was mean? I don't know, because we were never close and my parents loved to boast about her achievements but never ever mentioned any issues, whereas with me, they loved to bring out any flaws of mine constantly as teasing material. I only knew she had none because we went to the same school and I noticed her no longer walking around with people. Anyway, she had no friends. I did. I used to be decently popular. My sister realized that and suddenly I stopped being the occasional punching bag to a hated person she needed to take down at all times. She started accusing me of more stuff. She accused my friends of more stuff. My parents stopped allowing me to hang out with anyone, the excuses ranging from they're not good people according to your sister to why are you trying to leave us, why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time. What saved me from complete isolation was extended family. Most of my family lived in the same hometown, and I got along with my cousins despite some age difference. At one gathering, they invited me over to something, I don't remember what, and I sadly replied I'm not allowed to go anywhere. When asked why, my kid self with no filter replied that it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Well, that reached the adults, who apparently tore my parents apart. Later I was scolded for lying and grounded, as if I had anywhere to go, for a month. But after that they allowed me some leeway, so it was worth it. And my sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of extended family knowing her social status was bad and she demanded to be changed. And my parents immediately obliged, even though it cost them more since the school was further away. But she made friends on the new school. However, she never went back to the previous status quo of mostly ignoring me. I guess having felt the power of how badly she could screw with me, and anger that I told family she had no friends, she never let me go. My life was still bad. Her friends would come over and bully me and my parents called it light teasing. I never called friends over because my parents were awful hosts to them, or my sister would accuse them of taking stuff and they'd believe it. I did become close to my cousins though, since my parents never dared do any of that to family. And then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home at all, but my parents insisted. Well, at one point we were separated and he came to find me to tell me my sister was flirting with him. By which he meant, she came over with skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes really badly and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He was irked and ran off to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different tale, that my BF had instead tried to flirt with her, but she naturally refused since how could she do that to me? Guess who my parents believed? Now, my BF wasn't perfect but I immediately believed him. For a mean reason. But remember that back then I was a teen and suffering from the unfair bad treatment. I was very resentful and moody and now hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't mentioned them yet because they weren't relevant. My parents were / are overweight. And since they liked showing love via food, giving you more food, buying treats etc., my sister was / is also overweight, whereas I was / am not. In fact I've always been kind of skinny because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is. But my sister even then was already rude and spoiled, even her flirting attempts were bad because she never learned to work for anything since she could demand and my parents would deliver. Added to that the fact that she didn't look like some sexy model. Even my self-conscious teen self didn't believe my BF would try and cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents prohibited me from dating such a horrible boy. I did try to keep going in secret, but it was hard and the relationship ended. I did get another, but again my sister accused him of flirting with her when he refused her advances. Again my parents believed her. I tried pointing out how this happened again, but they decided that meant I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo-Juliet situation, and fizzled out again. I would eventually get called a slut in high school, as I was fine with making out with boys and such but refused to have relationships. Thankfully it never got back to my sister or parents. My sister did bring one boyfriend home during all this time. He was paraded with pride, and my parents spent every second telling me how good he was, and why couldn't I be like my sister and find myself someone like that. Until he stopped showing up, and suddenly he was conniving bastard that tricked my sister. Oh well. And the unequal treatment continued at this time. She had more spending money, her curfews were much better than mine, she was free to go anywhere at any time while I couldn't. If I pointed it out, my parents would say it's because she's older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't have the same treatment she had, and when pointed out, they'd deny they ever said that or claim it was because I couldn't be trusted like she was, using my sister's accusations against my BF and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time goes by, and it's time for my sister to graduate. She was accepted into a college. Not a very well-regarded one, and she had no scholarship or anything. Again, because only her achievements were told to me, I don't know which colleges she even tried for, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were bad in school though, because whenever she got a B we would celebrate. I would usually get good grades but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming since I always got those, what was there to celebrate? My parents, naturally, made a lot of fanfare and told her they'd pay for everything. I was relieved she'd be going away. Not that it made my life any easier. She'd always come home every other weekend and somehow stuff kept missing from her room or some other issue she'd think of to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict, etc. Eventually, my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money to pay for mine. So it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and waiting until my sister finished uni to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, part of the bills, and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom said yes. Except no. That is, because they were so caring towards me, and I had such bad judgment, they would decide if a college was worth my getting in debt or not. I'm not sure how they'd stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't mentioned. They had no idea what my grades were anymore, and never believed in my capabilities. Anyway, I didn't bat an eyelid. I simply said okay. My mom clearly didn't expect that and kept pushing. Maybe she hoped I'd throw a tantrum so they'd have an excuse to not ever pay for my college. But I said nothing except I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad later tried the same, but I also refused to be emotional. You see, after a whole lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations towards my education. I knew they would find an excuse to not pay for mine and make my life miserable. I never believed they would eventually pay it if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out, my friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study. And study I did, because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship. Not to anywhere like Ivy League or anything like law or medical school. But it was a good enough course, in a decent college, with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via parents, I put my achievement in social media at the same time I told them. Even forced myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going, as they'd have to explain to family why not. Initially they were even a little proud and boasting about it. And then I guess my sister got to them, and they changed gears and even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd suffer worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse not going a lot due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing any man to them. And my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, they'd have made a fanfare about it, moved back home, paying no bills or rent, but it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mom, obviously, thanks to my mom pulling strings. This was all sold to me as a source of pride. Oh well. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people that say that if I was in X situation, I'd have done something? My husband is the type that really does. I'm the person that is meek and a doormat in any situation and then can't sleep at night wishing I had done something, had thought of something witty to say, etc. I'm the person that can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the guy that claps back immediately. He loves drama, in that he loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget, he's just doing something worse for revenge. He's the one that wanted me to post here. And wanted to post on a nuclear revenge board too, but decided what we did wasn't nuclear. People were baffled I got together with him. But just because I was incapable, thanks to my upbringing probably, of acting like him, it didn't mean I didn't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't. And he treats people well as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off either, so we could take some long trips during the weekends to manage stuff. Plus there was some work flexibility, so we could stay in my hometown for a bit too if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. Well, at this point my parents naturally demanded they meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but was having a hard time. The distance had made me think maybe my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I cancelled Christmas when I told him I would at least ensure they were never alone with him. See, he had been getting ready for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in a pocket to record it all. He was stoked, thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So, off he went alone and excited to meet them. And came back later euphoric. Babe. You won't believe the awful shit they wanted. Babe. We can fuck them over so bad, there's so many possibilities. I was confused, and wanted to hear the recording but he, smartly, told me it was better to listen to him first or else I'd misunderstand him. Well. He went there, and instead of the flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment etc., they proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding. On one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle on my wedding first. In a wedding dress. Their excuses were that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister had at least the experience of it. On my venue. With pictures being taken, and the dress, and she'd have a cake later too etc. My husband will now type his part. Hey! Vengeful husband here, hell hath no fury like a pro-revenge / instant karma / nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife, she's my wife now, paints me as this quick-witted dude, I admit my neurons all but short-circuited when those folks legit suggested that shit like some sort of great fucking gift. Even Troy would rather take in the horse a second time, methinks. Alas, after my brain rebooted, I did have a whole catalog of insults about to spew out, but something in my soul whispered in my ear like the devil, string these fucks along. So I said I needed to think, see how my wife, back then fiancée, would react, and then ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife. So, my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, with a grin on his face. And had the recording to prove it. I was shocked. The distance had softened how bad they treated me. And I thought even they wouldn't go so far. Thankfully, my husband insisting on the angle of revenge helped me not go to a bad headspace. We had a blast thinking up ways to screw them over this. From ridiculously outlandish to what we thought was feasible. We then called his much more level-headed brother when we decided on a plan. It involved having 2 venue addresses, giving them the wrong one etc. Well, level-headed brother scolded us for it. While he acknowledged he would never be able to convince us from retaliation, he at least showed us something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at danger of getting sued. So we eventually settled for the most benign plan, act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is all mostly my husband, but he wants me to do the honors so here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was previously discussed with me, and were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents. Said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue and, not wanting family to fall apart, would be down to helping them do it. He pointed out I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. On the other hand, marriage is a big thing, so who knew if I'd lash out? Thus he suggested a compromise: they'd help pay for stuff. This way, I would feel even more pressure to not say anything, as not only would we be public, well, with our families there, but I'd be grateful to the help they gave and that'd mollify me. He said my parents looked surprised by my grown sister starting skipping with joy. Literally so, like a kid. So it was accepted. Important, my husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment in boyfriends in the past, these words were all my idea and I'm so proud of using their words against them lol. I was distrustful and controlling and liked to check his phone and stuff to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in any writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception. Where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I were milking them. How? Well, rather than pay for the wedding then lay low, of course my parents wanted input in everything. Some stuff that meant a lot to me, the songs and color palette, my husband would convince them to let it go to keep me in line. But since we never really cared for the ceremony to begin with, everything else was game. Or so they thought. What we did was thus: we'd go, say, to check the drink and menu options. We'd then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to also try it out, then sigh and say it's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill so we wouldn't get the best options. Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry and they'd pay for the most expensive. Same was done with photographer. Flowers, my husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other, tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with said flowers and they'd pay for it. Wedding dress, we hit a minor snag here. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, not outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't look that good on me. We had planned on saying yes then simply not using it, but my mom sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof I said okay. We had to go with me refusing in text, and standing my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all this time, they really kept communications outside any text. We made sure that it happened by, when my sister tried messaging my husband, have me reply to here. This solidified the uncontrolling and neurotic claims my husband was making. So they believed it and never risked anything in writing. And maybe some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family. But I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painting as this controlling and dangerous bitch is extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor lol. Oh, and my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted. Also, to really sell that he was with them, my husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge. But he never told them we hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus cost on our honeymoon, having this extravagant, expensive wedding, and barely spending a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents, lol. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right lol, was enjoying the whole tricking them more than planning our wedding lol. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his whole Saturday doing a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws, but here we are. Soon the day came. The plan my parents/sister/husband had come up with was, wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time, to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it, and walk down the aisle. By the time I heard what happened, it'd be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric from my dress alterations, and my husband took that to my parents' place, sister still lives with them even now, and showed them as proof he'd ruined the dress. Then said he had to go back to me as I was raging and he needed to calm me down, he'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our actual security hidden at first. As the guests and my parents arrived, all they could see was a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out security. A guy that looked like a bodyguard. We told him to not allow anyone my sister in, and even agreed on paying a handsome tip if he didn't reveal we told him that. Soon the time arrived. My parents got a text my sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad went and told people to start. My bridesmaids had been told to follow his lead beforehand, so they obeyed without checking with me. After they all went down and took their places, my dad stood up at the entrance, as if waiting for me. During this, a friend not in the wedding party texted me to get ready. This because if my husband or bridesmaids etc. took out a phone and started texting, people might notice. This friend was in on the plan. She's my husband's friend, as willing to help stir drama as he is and didn't care about being a bridesmaid or anything. Well, as soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song started playing, the doors open and I come in. My dad looked aghast at me being there. He tried glancing behind me, but you can't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he couldn't see what happened to my sister. And then his phone rang, I saw the caller ID and it was her. He just left me there with a mumbled something came up. There were gasps and confusion all around. The friend in on it, loudly asked what happened. I lied and in a teary voice said he told me it wasn't supposed to be me there. It's not what he said, but my husband and I agreed that if he dared leave me, I should say that to make him look the worst possible. As for the tears, I wish I could say it was just my stellar acting, but no. Despite everything, a part of me didn't think he'd go as far as abandon me there. That the sister thing wasn't true but an elaborate joke. I don't know. I was hurt, still am, so I was sincerely trying not to cry. The friend then loudly went, what did he mean by it shouldn't be you? So that as many people as possible could hear and spread it, then what I will go and check. And ran off. We decided to do this to make her create hell with the security and stop my dad from coming back and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. Watching him run desperately to me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what happened. Some apparently left to check too. When I reached my husband though, all was well. He made me feel better, joking my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar, and don't worry, he'd rake them over the coals for what they did lol. We got married without a hitch. My parents didn't come back. I did notice a lot of people leaving then coming back during the party, but no one dared tell me what was happening. Someone did come and whisper in my husband's ear and he went out. He came back after a while, with a thunderous expression, but whispered in my ear he needed to go hide somewhere before he broke character and started smiling lol. Well, what happened is, it worked. The following is the summed account from friends, family, the security guy and my husband, that I received afterwards. My sister did arrive in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in. Per our agreement, he claimed she must be in the wrong venue because there was already a bride. And yes, we tipped him really well as promised. My dad went there and tried threatening him with police, claiming he never heard of him, so he couldn't be working there. The security agreed to the police, since he was hired by us and doing his job. My dad realized by then it'd be too late and tried to demand he let my sister in. At this point the friend came over, started shouting and insulting my sister and asking what was going on. Basically stalling. My mom soon came and eventually other people. At this point the wedding plan was bust. All my parents could do now is damage control, as everyone that learned about it was aghast they'd try and pull it and screaming and berating them. The three naturally said it wasn't a secret, and threw my husband under the bus. At this point my husband was summoned. When he came over he put on his best look of confusion and denied. To quote him, gaslight, gatekeep, girlboss lol. He denied having ever agreed to something so ridiculous. When they insisted he did, he demanded proof and of course, they couldn't produce any. All text exchanges they could produce were about normal wedding decisions. My sister was crying and apparently sat on the floor kicking her legs like a kid. My dad looked like he'd beat my husband, but security and other people held him back. Of course, they said they had no proof because my husband told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, wow, how convenient huh? Then again repeated why would he ever agree to something so fucked up. Tore them a new one about being awful parents, then said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lying get in the way of his wedding and went back to me. No one believed them. The venue had cameras but they refused to show me the recording as that was only for security purposes. But some people filmed parts of it. Watching my parents and sister get ripped apart by any and everyone that came out to check the drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of stuff and not believed, to watch them have a taste was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying, my dad kept changing from purple to white, my sister was still on the floor crying and screaming. They kept insisting on that my husband was in on it. But people kept asking why would my husband agree, why was there no proof, why did they want my sister to do this to my wedding? And they had no good answer to any of it. Eventually they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad apparently had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Again, people said nothing to me all night. I guess they wanted to spare me. And maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest for once, but it did feel like everyone was making extra effort to be nice, positive and excited about everything. My husband says all the expensive shit they were eating drinking certainly helps lol. We had a blast. My husband maintained the forced angry face for only a short while before breaking out in smiles again. After that we went to the hotel to catch some sleep before going to our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents did try to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought that was risky as they could try and cancel them or something, so we refused. Of course, since that whole thing the three have tried to contact me. I've refused calls, because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. A smart thing, because my sister did eventually message me. I won't repeat it as it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense, but the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake that fooled them for months. He wants to print and put that on our wall lol, and hoped, but was also certain it'd happen, that I'd get cheated on by him. She did also suggest he was cheating on me with her, actually. My husband took my phone, screenshot the call logs, screenshot my sister's message, screenshot some messages of my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family group chat. And sent screenshots of messages to him, where they called him names and threatened him, but he kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" shtick, and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message in said group chat begging my family for help, as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He begged family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon now that they had failed to ruin my wedding. Then finished neatly with a request that they don't share our locations, to avoid my parents sending my sister over, and then claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to fuck her in our honeymoon suite. LOL. My family assured him they'd take care of it. And indeed, since then we've had silence. My husband is a little disappointed my sister didn't disobey, so he could tattle again while tearing her a new asshole. We'll see if it'll last. All in all, while I obviously would prefer to have a normal loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I got them back. Extra info. Do I know why they treat me like this? I've been asked this question a lot, so I assume you all will think the same. I have wondered this all my life, and I still don't know. I tried asking when I was young, but they denied any difference and scolded me for acting spoiled, so I quit trying. I've thought of many possibilities, but based on my observations I think it's this: I was unplanned. They took a while to have my sister, so she was not only wanted but also like a miracle child after so long. However, given our age difference is quite small, I think they didn't expect it to have a kid so soon or easily, and didn't use adequate protection way too soon after my sister's birth. And maybe didn't notice my mom was pregnant until too late. So they were saddled with an unplanned baby while still dealing with a newborn. And they're not that well off, so having the extra expense likely didn't help. So they resented me. But that's my conjecture. Regardless, I've accepted the answer won't truly matter. What they did to me was unwarranted no matter what. Did they really think this would work? My husband and I talked, and we have the theory that they never wanted to do this at all. We think my sister threw a tantrum over me getting married first when she barely gets dates, and they gave my husband that outlandish proposition. As in, they didn't want to pay for my wedding and didn't think we'd accept or that it'd even look good for them to do it. But by suggesting it and being refused, they could look like the good guys to my sister while having an excuse to not give me a dime. But then my husband accepted it, and they couldn't backtrack, or else risk my sister turning on them.
Thank you for watching and listening. Subscribe for more.